Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second office hours for OMS-CS 6300. I'm on a hotel room also this week, but it's a pure coincidence. So starting from next week, I should not be traveling that much anymore. So, but anyways, this is secondary. I'm here with Erin and Will. I'm gonna very quickly give you the announcement since they're short, and then I'm gonna let Erin and Will say hi and give you the updates on the grade. So this is the third week of the class, if I'm counting correctly. So you're doing the the Java and JUnit assignment. And just as a reminder, the goal of this assignment is really making sure that you can all run an IDE. If you want to use an IDE, which we recommend, but if you're a VI or Emacs or whatever floats your boat fanatic, feel free to use whatever you're comfortable with. But otherwise, the ability to use an IDE and also the ability of writing simple Java code and simple JUnit test cases. So as I said last time, I don't want to sound too harsh or too brutally honest, but the truth is that if you're struggling with this assignment, you should look back at the requirements for the class, because this should be an easy one for you. I mean, modulo the fact that, of course, you have to understand the requirements and you have to implement things correctly. But if you're struggling with, writing the classes, implementing the interface, and so on, take into account that it's, knowing, being able to program and knowing Java is sort of a requirement for the class, and therefore it's important that you are able to do so. Same thing holds for the next assignment, which is the one on Android, but we'll talk about that later. So next week we're gonna open, as I've seen, the assignment on Android. I think next week we're also gonna have our participation quiz, and
they have that this week.
Oh, it's this week. It's already open. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right, because that's the one we created at the beginning of the class. So you also have the participation quiz. That's right. That's right. And the participation quiz, just a couple of words on that. It's just to make sure that you read the welcome message. Basically, there's no rush. You can redo it. You take it, 10 times, and you can look back at the welcome message. So there's no requirements, so there's no tricky questions, there's no hidden requirements. It's just read the welcome message, and we want to make sure that you know how the class works, because we don't want kind of 5 weeks into the semester, which actually does happen. Somebody says, oh, I didn't realize that the deadline was on Friday night, and so that's and I didn't realize that if I resubmitted during the weekend, I was going to be penalized because the assignment was still open. So just make sure to read the welcome message, take the quiz, and after the quiz, you should be very familiar with the way the class works. So again, it should be a matter of minutes to do that. And that's all I have. I believe. If I forgot something, I'll think about it while Erin and Will do their spiel. And with that, Erin and Will.
Your turn first this time.
Oh, my turn first this time. I'd say on that participation quiz, like almost every question, if you answer it wrong, it's going to tell you why it's wrong. So that should make it even easier the next time you take it. So seriously, it will help you to take it. Even if you mess something up, it's going to tell you what's wrong with that answer. And that should help you remember that and not do whatever it is later. Let's see, we're working on assignment 2 grading. The late turn-ins for that would have just ended on Monday. So we're getting that downloaded and started.
Can I remind everyone while we're here, we've said this multiple times, and we've already had a couple of students who weren't listening, but if you're listening here, after that second assignment where we gave you the instructions to reset, do not use -f or -- force with Git at all, ever, unless you're absolutely certain what you're doing, because the potential for you to screw up something is high. Now, as Aaron just said, we're just getting started copying your repositories down. That means if at some point between when you finished and now you did a git push force or git push -f, there is some chance that even though you did assignment 2 correct, by the time we get it, you've rewritten history and it won't work properly. This can happen all throughout the semester. So please, 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 please do not use -f or -- force at any time this semester unless you are absolutely a Git expert and know for certain what you're doing. Thank you. Sorry, that's my word for the day.
Oh, I keep thinking that I need to work on putting in the scripts to turn off the force pushes after assignment 2, but it's so much easier to do that when we create the repositories, and then there's invariably going to be somebody who that confuses when we apply it later and has an issue with that. So that hasn't quite happened. It's very tempting though. Yeah, so we said we'd give you grade updates during the office hours. Grade 2, the assignment 2 is just starting being graded. That one is usually relatively quick, although I know we're trying to push a lot of stuff through this weekend. So I'll see about that. There is a mean median post that I'll put that up tonight to make sure that the mean median post is at least there. You can see it. It will be stickied. That will be updated every time there's new grades. You'll be able to see the information in that as soon as I post it. I think that's the main things.
All right, then we can jump to the questions, and let me get here. So let's start with the first one. And by the way, let me also apologize for the late posting of the office hours. It was I prepared the message. I needed to create the YouTube event, and then it just at my age it's easy to forget things. So it's that's what happened. So sorry for this. Next week, I believe the office hours will be exactly the same time. So we're gonna try to keep Wednesday at 8:45 as the regular time for the office hours, bearing unforeseen events. Mainly, it's really always travel. So if I happen to be on a plane or in a place where I cannot, where this time doesn't work, then we might need to move things. But otherwise, it's gonna be at this time. Okay, questions. When and how will the teams be announced? So the teams will be announced the week before the first team-related assignment is going to be open, which is the week of September 17th. And the reason why we don't create them beforehand is well, there's a couple of reasons, but one of the main ones is the fact that some people drop the class. So if we create the teams right away, we're going to have more trouble later on because we might have to do reshufflings. And so we wait not until the last minute, until when the teams are really needed, and take into account that assignment so the deliverable 0 for the group project is really nothing. You just have to provide your contact information. So that it's a week in which you just provide your contact information and you can get in touch with your teammates and do some planning. So you shouldn't really need to get in touch with your teammates before that. So having the teams a few weeks in advance should not really make a big difference. So that's why we don't really push it. Okay, let me get back to Piazza. I'll also give you some general advice for 279 will be nice. What are you looking for in terms of grading with this? So this is the one about the test cases, if I recall correctly. And let me double check. Yeah.
Frequent sort of question about what is trivial.
Right. And so, as I said in the announcements, the main goal of this assignment is to make sure that you know what it means to write a unit test cases, you know how to write a unit test case, and you know how to compile it and run it, and you know how to write some simple Java code. So we're not going to be very picky. So if you take an existing test case, you change you add one character to the string that doesn't really change the functionality or the goal of the test or the what the test is checking at all, that's trivial. Otherwise, if you have a good reason, if you have a reason for testing and you can write it down in the comment, it's pretty much that's a good test. So now don't take my word as I can put there anything, but just think about it. Just think about what it will make sense to check for the test. There aren't that many tests that you need to write, so you shouldn't really have any problem coming up with some meaningful test cases. And in terms of whether you should check corner cases versus non-corner cases, so checking corner cases is fun for some definition of fun. So that's all something you can always do and gives you kind of normally a good set of test cases, because even for simple programs, there's normally a number of corner cases. So you can use that as inspiration, but otherwise it's perfectly fine if you just test the regular functionality. And again, without getting into too many details, you should not really need to be too creative to come up with the test cases that are required. So don't worry about it too much. Just think about what the code you're writing, think about what could go wrong with the code, and write test cases to make sure that it doesn't, and put a comment there, say what every test case, what each test case means, and you'll be done. I don't know if Erin or Will want to add something on this, but
I think the two types of guidelines I usually give when we're asked this question is that if you can write, you have to write the purpose for the test case in the comments. If you can write two different purposes and they're actually different purposes and not just a list of what the input variables are, that's a pretty good start. If you're trying to say why you're testing something and your comments are all the same, that's not a good sign. And another thing to think about is, could you expect one of the tests to fail when the other test doesn't at any point? If they would always fail at the same time, and you can't imagine what would happen that would make one of them fail and one not, or vice versa, that's probably not testing different things. So I think those are both good ways to think about it.
And don't stress too much about it. That's the other thing. And especially don't do push minus F. I'm just kidding. But I know that, Will, well, we actually know that, Will is right, because we've been burned by that a number of times. And that's, people think that they know, that it's safe to do it in some cases, and then, bad things happen. So just.
Well, and it doesn't help that with certain types of errors that you have, if you go and Google them, one of the first things you find on things like Stack Overflow is, oh, just try doing a push-F. And then people think, oh, okay, well, Stack Overflow's never lied to me before, and they screw up their repository.
Stack Overflow lies sometimes.
Yes, this is what I'm saying.
There's a nice XKCD comic about Git where they're just like, oh, and you blindly follow the instructions that somebody posted online, and that will make Git work. And for some definitions of work, maybe, yep. But if you don't know why or what it's doing, you can do some kind of risky things to your repository. Because you are the only one working in your repository, nothing complicated should happen to it. There shouldn't be anything that you need drastic fixes for. You need to go back, delete stuff, just delete stuff locally, make a new commit, and it's all good, because we don't care if you have horrible stuff in the history of 50 billion mistakes. That's fine.
I should also say, because there have been a couple times when people ask, well, why did the instructions say we should check out assignment 2 to, again, instead of using the one that was already out there? The problem is the one that was already out there, you had two different places you'd checked out. And I believe one of them got left in a somewhat out-of-date state, which meant if you were using that one, your pushes were not going to work. And the only way you were going to be able to resolve that was either throwing away your work and recreating it in a new checkout, or doing a force, which would then screw up your assignment 2. This is why we suggest you start with a clean repository with each assignment, because that way, if you left it in a weird state from a previous assignment, you're not suddenly in a bad state.
It's not so bad after this assignment. I'd just pull if you're worried about it. But with them having a user 1 and a user 2,
right,
they'll they'll continue this one for assignment 3, and then they'll go try to do assignment 4 in the other one.
Exactly. This is why it's better to start with a fresh pull each time.
Yeah, now that we've kind of sidetracked back into Git.
I knew that all I had to do was to mention push -f, and that was it. All right, so any tips or tricks for throwing exception and where to put them in the code? Let me look at the follow-ups. My advice for the code we are doing in this assignment, check at the very top of the function. The contract of the functions dictates the order as one exception supersedes another. That's very true. Another advantage of doing it up top is that it allows you to assume in the rest of the code that the things the exceptions checked for are not possible. That's very, very good answer. And there's the follow-up, which is thanks, Chris. I'm hoping during office hours we can get a brief overview of throwing exception for those of us that are newer to Java. I've been doing a lot of Googling on my own, but the syntax and overall purpose is tripping me up a bit. So, and there's a +1. The reason why you use exceptions, the exceptions are a nice way of sort of handling error conditions in a way that is orthogonal to the code. So instead of having to kind of return error code or worry, in performing continuous checks, what you do, you just, when you invoke a piece of code that can, where things can go wrong, you can just surround it with a try block. And then if something goes wrong, the catch block will be executed. So that's a general idea with the exception. Code that might fail is in a try block. And when something bad happens, an exception is thrown that returns the control to the catch. If you're the one writing the code or things might go wrong, which is the case here, what you have to make sure is that you throw the right exception at the right time. And throwing an exception is really nothing more than saying, hey, this error occurred, but you do it by throwing an exception object that then kind of activate the mechanism that I just described. So basically, there's nothing magic about exceptions. Are just you can see there's not really an asynchronous, but sort of as I say, orthogonal way of throwing or reporting the fact that there's been an error. So what you have to do in this case, or in any case when you use exception, is just make sure that you know in which cases you should throw an exception. And in this case, as Christopher said, the specification of the function tells you exactly when to do what, and then all of your exceptions will be, there'll be a check for that condition and the throwing of an exception afterwards, or the normal execution if that's not the case. So again, as I said, there's really nothing magic about it. Make sure that you comply with the specs. The specs are very clear in terms of what should be thrown, what should be checked first. So that's why we have, kind of the specific sequence. So just check in the same sequence, and how to do the check should be straightforward. And if the check is negative, so it means like if there is actually a violation of what is the assumption, the precondition of the method, then you throw the exception, the corresponding exception. So hopefully this helps. Sorry, Erin, go ahead.
If you like the sort of arguments that programmers get into over like brackets or Vim or something, just Google for checked versus unchecked exceptions in Java. And you'll get some interesting articles and posts on that about when you should use checked exceptions versus unchecked, or whether you should use them at all. Some people can get really emotional about those parts.
Yeah, no, in fact, this doesn't happen for people who are new to exceptions, but otherwise, like anything else, there's religions in programming. And so that, well, there is for exceptions, there is, I mean, some people also hate exceptions. I mean, I heard that because, they think that it's not an actual way of handling, issues. And, it's, again, everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I find them, very useful. They're very much used. They're used not only in Java, they're used in a number of languages. And so it's good to be familiar with them. Why does the last method in assignment 3 not return anything? Should we just be setting the resulting string back to my custom string or some other variable? There's a follow-up. I don't think I can explicitly give you the answer, but take a look at the test case they presented as an example, specifically the method they called to assert the test case. That should give you an indication as to what is going on in the implementation of the method. And there's another follow-up, which is a method's return type is determined by its implementation within the code, and now it is being called. For this assignment, the test class detects the input and output of each method. It is good to know that all the methods can be designed to return void and instead use a getter to return its value. In the test cluster, my custom string test.java, we see exactly just that action. Test case, test flip letters in substring 1, modify the string with my custom string flip letters in substring 1830, then uses the getter to do the actual returning for the function. To answer your question directly, be sure to set your custom string to the flip string by adding something like this to the end of the void function. Custom string. Okay, so I don't know how Erin will feel about this. This is a little too close to providing a solution.
Well, that's actually a little bit backwards because
it's also a little bit backward, but let's handle the two things in a separation. First of all, you should never post something which is a solution or a partial solution, okay? Which includes what to put in the code. Is not super important in this case because this assignment is simple and we talked about what the goal is, but you should stay away from kind of revealing too much. And I don't know if Erin, that when you say backward, you were referring to the first part of the response, which is the way I feel about it. But so go ahead and say it, and then I'll say my.
Well, I think he might be talking more about the general situation than that particular piece. I mean, he did phrase it for that particular method. But since you can't change the return types that are declared in the method, that doesn't particularly help you. There are a lot of methods in other libraries that you do have to know whether they're altering what you passed in or whether they're returning something new that is a variation on what you passed in. So you will see a lot of times in regular Java code like string something equals method where you're passing in that same string because you have a method that returns a new copy and you really wanted to alter the original copy. And you've got both types of methods in this assignment. Not sure
so the part the thing I wanted to instead clarify here is, it's I agree on the general answer, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't come across as you write the method based on the test cases or based on the way the things is used. So in a sense, that's a decision you make beforehand, and the way in which many object-oriented classes. Is everybody okay?
Yeah, I just knocked something over.
Okay. I thought somebody fell over. So the way in which many object-oriented classes work is that the methods are the way in which you modify the state of the class. So that's really the key point here. So in many cases, the object, when you call the method, is the side effect of the method on the state of the class that matter rather than what is returned by the class. In many cases, like in this one. So I will so to better figure out how this what this means, I will look at encapsulation, information hiding. So this is just an implementation of that concept and the idea that very often you use methods to modify the state of the class. Then that raises an issue, which is if you need to test these classes, how do you test them? And the way in which you test them, so you need a way to look inside the state of the class, which is actually an issue for some code. So if you have code that changes the internal state and doesn't provide, for example, getters or setters or ways of accessing the state, then there is no way for you to check unless you use reflection and break encapsulation. But anyways, that's a longer conversation. I just want to make sure that the message didn't come across as you use a method, or you write some test case and then you implement the method accordingly. It's actually the other way around. And then sorry if I'm misinterpreting the answer. So the test cases show you what is the semantics of the method because they're implemented based on that, but they're not really the ones dictating in a sense the way the class is written. Again, if I apologies if I misinterpreted the suggestion, but I wanted to make sure that this was clear. I have several questions I wanted to get clarified. Is there a way for us to check our implementation against the instructor's test before submitting? No, there is no way, for the simple reason that you have to write test cases for your code, and if we give you our test cases, then you have to become more and more creative to generate test cases that are not ours. So we're just we're just using them for. I guess I'm getting feedback. I don't know.
No, you sound fine.
Yeah, there is an echo coming back.
Oh, okay. So anyways, it's just that's the reason why we don't give you the test cases, not because we want to be mysterious, but because if we give you those test cases, then again you'll have a hard time writing yours. But don't worry about it too much, because I mean they're not tricky test cases or anything like that. My current assumptions about empty strings: add digits, return 0. Do not throw an exception if it's an empty string. Flip letters, throw index out of bound exception since end is greater than length 0. Okay, so without looking back at the assignment, so I'm gonna have Erin double check or jump in if I say the wrong thing, but I would say definitely true for the first one. So if you have an empty string, you should return 0 for a digit. And the flip letters should throw an index out of bound exception if you have an empty string, since end is greater than length than the length, which is 0. For that one, I'll have to double check the assignment because it depends on how the indexes are defined, but I think it's the case. So can you confirm, Erin?
Yeah, that's in the report.
All right, so these are both yes. Definition of character. Oh, I'm gonna let Erin get this one because she already had fun on this on Piazza. I'm just reading the question. I'm assuming we just have to handle letter, digits, punctuation marks, white spaces, escape characters. Do we need to worry about ASCII, abstract symbols, foreign languages, etc.?
We're not going to go that far out in left field. Like, none of our test cases are going to be really obscure. For a character, anything that's a Java character, like, we're not talking just letters. Any character is a character. You don't need to look into alternate character sets. Like, if I can't type it in the console by default and have it be okay, we don't really want to test it, because then you're getting into environment specific stuff that we're just not concerned with at this level. I'll always have somebody use an extended character set, and then the computer I'm on goes, I have no idea what this letter even is. And it has nothing to do with their code at that point.
Okay, and there was a clarification from Adrian, and appreciate that. So he said, this was not a general suggestion, but just for the specific assignment. Then there's a question about any ideas when assignment 2 will be graded. So we covered that at the beginning. And finally, can we discuss if duplicate white space should be considered for part 1 of assignment 3? I'm gonna let.
It's still a character. Like, it's not particularly unique in any way. I think we've actually already answered that in about 3 threads or so. So yeah, it's just like any other character.
Okay, and I think that was the last question. So let's see if something else pops up. In the meanwhile, trying to think whether there's something else we should mention.
I feel like there was something earlier, but now it's hard to recall.
Well, if we think about it after we're done, we'll add it to the, I guess, to the thread of the office hours. But I cannot think of anything right now.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing else, I guess we're gonna say bye to everybody. Thank you for participating in the office hours. As I said, we're gonna see you again next week at this time, unless I'm missing something. But Actually, I can double check immediately. And so yeah, next week at this time should work just fine. And before that, we're gonna see you on Piazza, and we have a new question. So, at what point in the week should we start bothering you to post the office hours? As soon as possible. Now, seriously, if Ronald, normally I have an alarm that goes off on Saturday that reminds me to set the office hours. I haven't set it yet this semester, and so I'll do it right away, right after the office hours. But since between now and then I'll probably forget. No, it's just if you don't see it by the end of Sunday, for sure, ping us and as a reminder. But we'll try to post it on Sunday morning at the latest, so that and even if we don't know the time exactly, so at least we will give you a chance to post your questions, have a place where to post your questions.
I think I would have normally nagged you before this too, but I really was holding on to that long weekend at the beginning of the semester.
Yeah, in fact, I think that was also another thing. That was a kind of a long weekend with the kids at home. That definitely doesn't help remembering things or not dropping stuff.
Day to Labor Day for my birthday, and I'm like, this is the last summer holiday, so just really hold on to that.
And we have another question. How many people would be in our project teams? 3 or 4?
Everything's made where it can be done by 3. We try to put 4 in the teams, but it's like it's never going to divide up super evenly. And
only 1 year in 4 or 1 semester in 4 those would actually divide out evenly.
Yeah, but also that buffer of it being 4 means, like, if it's not ideal in some way or one person vanishes 2/3 of the way through, the project is made to be done by 3. Yep. So you should still be fine.
All right, then if nothing else pops up, so typically there are these office hours in which every time you're about to close the broadcast, something else pops up, and so we get into this ridiculous loop of keeping to say goodbye. Hopefully this is not one of those days.
Yeah, we've gotten really good at saying goodbye over and over and over again. I think we've probably said that more than anything else in all these office hours.
Exactly. So on that note, goodbye. We'll see you next week, and I'm gonna let Erin and Will say bye as well, and then we'll be done.
So long, everyone.
And we'll see you on Piazza.